We don't even have all the additional.
Right.
And you want to make that announcement first, because I think many people are. Yes, I had a few people ask me and call me about it today. Because everybody is very.
Hello.
Hello.
You. I have to just change my speakers to owl and my video to owl, and she picked up. I'm gonna swoop it up here so you can see everybody.
Oh, yay. There we go.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm gonna.
I did order that my doohickey, I'll be able to.
Okay. Can someone nod if they can hear us?
Oh, that's me.
Yeah.
I do.
Big echo.
Um.
I muted, I'm
can you
sorry.
mute those? Yeah, it's not up there as town hall meeting room.
Yeah, it's up top there.
Right. Is that who you are?
Yeah, I changed it last night because.
You know.
Okay, can everybody still hear us? Shake your head, yes or no, dance, okay. Perfect, thank you.
We ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, I am going to call meeting of the Shutesbury Selectboard to order. Today is Wednesday, August 9th, and the select board is meeting in person at Town Hall, and we are joined by the Conservation Commission this evening, who is meeting remotely. Miriam, do you want to call your meeting to order?
I think you're muted. Miriam.
All right, thank you. I'm going to call to order the Shutesbury Conservation Commission at 7:32. Present are Miriam DeFont, Mary David, Robin Harrington, Scott Kahn, and Beth Wilson.
Thanks, Miriam. So we have three things on this evening's agenda. And I believe the agenda for the Conservation Commission matched the one for the Select Board, just was in a slightly different order. So the first item that we're going to be discussing is the Commission's use of attorneys. And particularly using special counsel to review the draft protection bylaw regulations. Second, we're going to be talking about holding a joint meeting with the Conservation Commission, the Select Board, and special counsel for the two committees. And then third, talk about the establishment of a Conservation Commission legal fund, which would be as a result of a donation from a town resident. Miriam, are you in agreement?
Yes. There were some other requests that we had sent to the commission, to the select board. I'm just reviewing my notes to see, we had asked the select board also to respond about how the Conservation Commission can get legal advice regarding Lake Wyola permitting projects, since our town council has recused herself. And there were some questions about the permitting that has come up, and we don't have a pathway for getting legal advice. So we are hoping the select board would clarify that as well.
So we don't have that on the agenda for this evening.
I'm sorry, there was someone who came in, I didn't hear.
Sure, it was another request for legal counsel related to the Lake Loyola.
Oh, the violation order
order.
that
Right.
it was
Well,
written not.
It was really about general permitting questions, is not just the violation notice.
Well, maybe after the first conversations that will shed some light on this request.
Okay, all right, why don't we start and we'll try and incorporate that. So I think what I want to make just a really very brief statement, just because there's been a lot of discussion out there, and I thought it would be useful to kind of give at least my my perspective on where things are vis-a-vis the Conservation Commission and the Select Board. And I first want to say, you know, we are not adversaries, because we are all the town. The town is not the Select Board or the town administrator. We're all part of town government. And you know, I understand both the Conservation Commission and the Select Board have the best interests of the town at heart. We might diverge in our beliefs as to what is best, and that should lead to thoughtful dialogue and negotiations, not recrimination. My sincere hope that we can move forward in a collaborative and respectful way, and that goes for all boards as well as townspeople. So, first, let's talk about the use of special counsel, and maybe Miriam, you can just summarize where the request from the Conservation Commission with regard to special counsel.
Thank you, Rita. I'd be happy to, and I would just like to second all of what you just said. I think I can speak for the rest of the commission that we also want to work collaboratively and view us all being part of the town, including everybody who's on this call and all the residents who aren't on the call too, but we are all working together, I think, and I believe that. Last year in 2022, well, actually in 2021, the Conservation Commission began working on revising its bylaw regulations. And we had discussions with Donna McNichol in 2022 during a public hearing process where she was consulting, and we reviewed our bylaw, and she advised us that there were portions of our bylaw that were not clearly defined in our regulations, and we had a duty to develop regulations post haste. And we began a process of developing new regulations. We looked comprehensively at the whole body of regulations and looked at what needed to be updated, and hired a consultant that the town generously offered funding for to assist us in developing some sound regulations based on how regulations are approached in other communities. And during that whole process, we had been expecting that town council was going to do the review. That had been the discussion I had had with Donna McNichol going back to 2022. When she had met with the commission, that we would get the draft regulations put together and then she would do a review. And she and I had emails back and forth and a few phone conversations in earlier this year where it was, again, my understanding that she was still on board to be doing this review. And then in June, we learned that she was going to recuse herself. In the meantime, for fiscal year 23, Becky had authorized 5 hours of Donna's time for that review process. So obviously that money did not get spent for that purpose. So the commission wrote to the select board asking for 5 hours of a special counsel time to do the review that we had been hoping and expecting we would get from Donna and that she was unable to provide. And the other requests came about because a member of the public came forward and generously wanted to make a memorial donation on behalf of his partner, who had been a former commissioner and died suddenly a few years ago, and wanted to provide some financial support for the commission in doing this kind of regulatory work. But we can't act on that without authorization from the town to set up and receive those funds. And I believe he wrote to the town to kind of describe what he was hoping would happen with that donation. And of course, I think that he would want to hear back from the town about whether it was agreeable to that.
That's the third item on the agenda.
Yeah.
So we will,
Okay.
we'll,
They're all
Talk
kind of
about-
connected, but yep.
yeah, they're connected, but, comments from select board members regarding the request. As Miriam pointed out, there were, we had approved, or Becky had approved five hours. At that point, it was done at McNichol time. Now we're talking about special counsel, and just understand that the special counsel costs are more than double what we get charged by town council. So they're up to $335 an hour. So it should be ours worth to consider. Comments?
I have a question for Miriam.
Sure.
Miriam, you want the special counsel to look over the regulations. That's kind of a general scope. Is there something, are you able to define it a little more specifically, since the cost is a little higher than, or double what Donna would show us?
What we would be asking her to do?
Yeah, a little more specifically. I know, look
You-
over the regulations, but what else are you
The
asking?
way that I had anticipated structuring this originally, when Donna was going to be doing it, is that the attorney would read over the regulations and possibly mark them up with questions, that we would have a meeting with me and the attorney and the two consultants, technical consultants, which was Pat Garner and Janice Stone. And then we would have a meeting with the whole commission to review those regulations. And if there were some, if there were some revisions between there and then, that we would, red line those revisions, so that when we had an open meeting with the whole party, the whole cohort of the commission, would have our kind of best edited version to review, so that, there would be a couple of meetings that she would attend. And there would be some time that she would need to read through the regulations and to edit them or make her comments. When I had spoken to her before this meeting, I spoke with her, I guess, back in June, and asked her if she felt like she could do this in 5 hours. She thought that was reasonable, given the length of them, that she could do the whole thing in 5 hours.
So she looking at the list that you just gave us, that would be only either an hour for each meeting and a couple hours to read, couple hours to make questions. And she thought that she could do that in 5 hours,
Yeah.
realistically.
Well, she's not here for us to ask her that, but that was how what we had discussed.
Miriam, I'm recalling that you had sent another email revising the request to 10 hours. Is
Well,
that
when,
remembering?
yes, well, we had received an email from you, Becky, saying that the select board wanted to discuss tonight the idea of a working meeting. And Beth
That was
had,
in res-
that Beth had not factored that into this estimate. So if there was going to be another kind of round of meetings that would not be included in this 5 hours. This is kind of like the base of what we were expecting before we thought there was going to be any working meetings with the select board.
Thank you very much.
So this is just kind of a starter amount, their starter number.
Well, this was what we initially had thought we needed in order to move forward with Donna McNichol.
And you would, have access to more money. It was specifically for the regulations and the bylaw if the gift account is approved. Is that correct?
I'm having a hard time hearing. I'm sorry. Could
Oh,
you
I'm sorry. I have to talk to talk to this. What I was saying is you would have additional funds available for legal if the select board approved the account from the private citizen. Is
Yes,
that correct? With
yes.
his stipulation that those funds be used for regulations and the bylaw.
Yes. Now, I don't remember, I don't have his email in front of me about how he worded it. And we can go back and revisit that. I just don't have it pulled up in front of me. But I think you all have it.
Yeah, I have it. I don't have it right in front of me. Okay, so I think one thing that we just need to make sure is understood is that when the select board approved special counsel for lot 032, the contract was executed with the Conservation Commission, and it was for $2,500. And I did a tally before the meeting that the commission has now spent over $9,000 in legal funds since that time, when only $2,500 had been approved by the select board. And that's the key here. The select board has to approve expenses. And what's happened with our special counsel is that every time the scope has expanded and the amount of money has expanded, we have gotten a contract amendment. And that didn't happen, and that will have to happen going forward, because there was really no authorization to spend beyond $2,500. So when we make this agreement on legal funds, that needs to be understood.
Rita, I'm not sure where the 9,000 is coming from. Do you think you could send us some accounting of where that came from? Because
It's all the bills, it's all the invoices that we have from
Kane Hibbert.
Kane Hubbard. Yeah, it's $9,000.
okay, I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, and we had talked about some of the items being outside of that, a number of the items being outside of that original scope. So, to the select board members or anybody from the Conservation Commission have any questions regarding this request?
Like I said, I have two questions. One is, just speaking to the public, there's been a fair amount of public pressure on us, the select board, to make sure that there are meetings in the future about the changes regarding regulations. That may not even be required. The hearings, I don't even know if they're required or not, but I just point that out. That's all. There's a real pushback from a number of people in the community. There's obviously people who want it to happen, want the new regulations to happen very quickly as well. But so there's two sides of that coin. That's what I'm saying.
I think we should just go home. I have to prove.
Okay.
Somebody isn't muted. You got it. Okay, good. So the commission has gotten all of those requests, I assume, for additional meetings regarding the regulation.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so do I hear,
Can I offer?
yeah, go ahead.
I think based on what, Marion had just said, I think if I feel comfortable, to feel comfortable voting for this, I'd like to make sure that either the lawyer or Miriam send us what you just said the scope of work will be, so that it's laid out specifically to the attorney, to the select board, and that there's an accountability when that input comes in, to stay within that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I would feel voting for this.
Is that, did you hear that, Miriam?
Not all of it.
Okay, so, what I basically said is for me to feel comfortable voting for this, from the Concom or the chair of the Concom, from the attorney. I think what you laid out when I asked the question about exactly what the scope of work is you were asking her to do for the 5 hours. I'd like it in writing in a way that it can be referenced as a scope of work for those 5 hours at the $300, what you said, $300.
It's $335.
$335. That's how I feel comfortable voting for this, that it's very specific. And it's not open-ended.
And are we still talking about 5 hours, or are we increasing that? Based on, joint working meeting? That's a question for the Conservation Commission.
Well, I don't think we know what the working meeting involves. I think that's something we have to have a discussion about. I'm happy to write up a scope of work for the 5 hours that we discussed. And I can give that to Beth Goodman and to the select board so that you'll have that as a reference, and I can ask her to incorporate that scope into her, her retainment agreement.
Okay, and I just want to make a note that previously the Conservation Commission executed the agreement with Elizabeth Goodman, and I've had 2 different opinions about whether or not it should have been the select board executing the agreement rather than the Conservation Commission. So we'll just get that straightened out before the agreement is ready. But regardless, it just has to be a select board approving the funding. So somebody want to do the calculation?
Oh, the count, yeah. hold on. I'll break it up.
335.
335. 335 times 5,
Mhm.
it's 1,675.
Okay. So do I hear a motion to approve $1,675 for special counsel for the Conservation Commission to review the draft wetland protection bylaw regulations?
So
Second,
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
thank you so much.
Stocker, aye.
Farrell, aye. Okay, second item is.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's the select board has made a request to hold a joint working meeting with the Conservation Commission and special counsel for the Conservation Commission and the select board's special counsel. And the genesis of this is that there has been that we as a select board have gotten an opinion from our special counsel, Greg McGregor, and his take on the regulations and the relationship to the existing bylaw were different from what we heard from Attorney Goodman, and we feel that we have to protect the town. That's our responsibility. That we could be legally liable if, in fact, there was a problem with the regulations and the existing bylaw. So we had proposed and we were going to discuss tonight having a working meeting. It had been suggested to me back a couple of months ago, the last time I probably talked to Greg McGregor, well, maybe sometime in early July. And we wanted to pose that to the Conservation Commission and kind of get your take.
Well, can you, thank you, and I'd like to hear from the rest of the commission, but can you share, Rita, how you're envisioning structuring this and what the goals of the meeting would be?
Sure. I think the goals of the meeting are for our special counsel to outline his concerns vis-a-vis the existing bylaw and the proposed regulations. So while I believe it was his July 9th email detailed a number of concerns, we have not had any discussions directly with the Conservation Commission about those concerns.
Do we have that,
So,
Rita, do we have that email?
yeah, I believe so.
I'm not sure I remember.
Oh, you do, because it was shared with Smart Solar Shutesbury.
Okay. Okay,
So just, a couple of notes from what McGregor had said in his email. He said that the proposed regulations go beyond the legal authority conferred by the existing bylaw. He also raised questions about provisions within the regulations that are problematic and conflict with the current bylaw. And we are really concerned that the town is vulnerable to litigation that could be prohibitively expensive and potentially invalidate the local bylaw, which is not anything that anyone wants. We're currently in very expensive litigation around the town bylaw, which had been thoroughly vetted and approved by council. We don't want to get into another situation where we have been told now by the preeminent environmental attorney in the state of Massachusetts that there's a problem. And we think it's appropriate for us to sit down with the Conservation Commission and go through his concerns and have a discussion about approach.
Sounds
You have
good.
anything
No, that's
to add?
good. I
Okay.
agree.
Miriam, I don't know if you're recognizing or you want me to recognize.
yeah, I'll recognize Mary, but could I just respond with a couple pieces of information that might be helpful in response to what you just said, Rita? Would that be okay, Mary?
Yes.
Okay. So I appreciate everything that is being said, and we really have welcomed the feedback from Attorney McGregor. He really is very expert, and it is kind of a luxury to get this kind of feedback. Certainly when we were envisioning a legal review, we weren't expecting to get a legal review from Gregor McGregor, who is one of the most experienced and knowledgeable attorneys in the field of wetlands regulations. So there's no question that we're not happy there's no question that we're happy to get this feedback. What I do want to point out is 2 points that we've said before, and I don't want to belabor it, but we also do not want to see the commission exposed to litigation or unnecessary appeals because of, flawed or shoddy regulatory work. We're trying to do our due diligence to avoid that. We are concerned that we are currently exposing the town because we don't have updated regulations. We've been advised by town council repeatedly that we need to update our regulations. And she is recently as a week or two ago, an issue came up where I needed to have an exchange with her. And she said, you need to update your regulations to address this issue. So we're constantly coming up with administrative issues that our regulations don't spell out, and having our more solid administrative process in our regulations, I think will help protect the town from unnecessary appeals. That said, I just want to point out that the email that we got and the feedback we got from Mr. McGregor, since then, we have done a couple of versions, a couple of revisions, and we took out most, if not all, of the language that he objected to, or we altered it. And hopefully, with those alterations, those will satisfy some of the concerns, and we would certainly have our attorney look at his feedback and compare the language so that she understands fully what his concerns are. So that would be part of the review process. Thank you. Mary, go ahead.
Yes, so my concerns are, we have done revisions to the regulations based on public feedback, based on McGregor's feedback, but for doing this, for the revisions that we have, we are asking for council to review those regulations in the time. I appreciate everything you say, and I don't disagree. I just have a concern that to have a joint meeting with 2 lawyers at $700 an hour is not, I don't think is fiscally responsible to look at it. I would suggest that we go forward and have our review of the regulations, then send them back, which we've adjusted to Attorney McGregor, to see if the adjustments fit with his opinion as to what we should do, and see where they go, as opposed to sitting in a meeting, spending a lot of money with lawyers and everybody there. I do think it's important to have that review, but I would just suggest a different way of doing that. Thank you.
Well, if we're going to have McGregor review the draft regulations, why not just have one attorney review them then? Rather than pay special counsel for the Conservation Commission and then forward it back to the select board, then double pay, as you are indicating, Mary.
Rita, I don't think that he could be our reviewer working for us. And the statutory responsibility that we're obligated to fulfill is for us to have a public hearing and to promulgate these regulations. And we really don't have the authority to delegate it to the select board and their attorney. And Mr. McGregor works for the select board in his role representing the town on applications, or an application before us. So it would be a conflict of interest for him to be our attorney for this purpose. And it's not to disparage him in any way, because I have a great respect for him. It's just that we really need to have an attorney that we can work with and have some working meetings with to assist us. And I don't know that he can do that. I don't think he can. I don't think that that kind of squares up with these roles and boundaries.
Yeah, I don't see any conflict, and I would assume that there isn't any conflict. I do want to go back to, it's not strictly the regulations, it's when is the bylaw done. And I know Miriam, you said you mentioned Don McNichol and talking, get the regulations done, but she has also said the bylaw should be done first and then the regulations follow. And, we've gone round and round about this. I still don't understand what the urgency is around the regulations when we have them. We've heard from, again, this preeminent attorney that there's a problem with the current bylaw conforming to the draft regulations. So that's the other part of it. I guess I don't understand why you wouldn't agree to a meeting.
No, I'm not agreeing. I don't think any of us has said, I haven't said that we wouldn't agree. I mean, I know Mary voiced an opinion, but I haven't said that, and I don't know how the other commissioners feel.
Okay, well, maybe we could hear from them.
Mary's got her hand raised. Did you want to clarify something, Mary?
Yes, I do just want to clarify. I do think the opinions that have been given to us is that, yes, there are some things in the bylaws that need to be revised, but the regulations are really where the impact and the legal problems are occurring. And that is where it really needs, the regulations really need to be done. The bylaw stands and could probably be and will be adjusted, but does not have the implications that not updating the regulations do. Thanks.
Thank you. Could I, before you guys weigh in, could I make a proposal for us to consider? Would that be okay?
I think Scott has a hand up.
Yeah, I'm asking Scott, Beth, would that be okay? Beth, so I'd like to make a proposal, Rita, and I think this is a path forward that will work for us in our process, and it will work for the select board. We have a statutory obligation to promulgate these regulations through a public hearing process. And we have already opened up that public hearing process by having one formal public hearing, but we've had several public meetings where we've done presentations for the public. And we haven't finished accepting public comment or having future public meetings. We've discussed having at least one, maybe more public hearings to make sure that we're hearing from the public and we're having an exchange before we adopt any regulations. And I would like to propose that we roll in and accommodate this request into our public hearing process by holding a public hearing at some date to be determined when everybody can make it, that we advertise it to the community, because we have been hearing from the residents that people would like more meetings and opportunities to ask questions. And I think having it be an open meeting is important. And that perhaps what we would do is structure it in a way where we would dedicate a block of time, maybe the first hour, to a discussion just between the select board and the Concom and our attorneys and our consultants, our technical consultants, so that if there's a technical question that isn't really a legal question, but has to do with scientific information or scientific techniques, we could have Pat Garner and Janice Stone there to provide their technical expertise, because that's really a little bit out of the wheelhouse of what attorneys are experts in. And then we could open up to the public for comments and questions. And at that point, we could decide whether we need to have another public hearing or whether that feels to the commission like it's sufficient for us to make a decision. But that feels like a process that is consistent with kind of our regulatory role and doesn't kind of violate our public hearing process, but also kind of accommodates this desire to include the select board. And I would propose that we do this by Zoom also. So that would be my suggestion. Maybe the commissioners could comment on that. Beth, do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, I agree that I feel like we're going in circles with the, do we update the bylaw? Do we update the regulations? Which do we do first? But I feel like we've put a lot of effort into these regulations at this point. And as Miriam said, we sort of started the process with the public hearings. I like what Miriam is suggesting as a way to have a public hearing that involves the select board and the select board's attorneys, all of their comments, but then also can take into account some public comments that have been coming up and the public's request for more public hearings regarding the regulations. I guess I just, at this point, feel like we should just push through with the regulations and then move on to the bylaw. I guess I don't understand why it needs to go the other way. I totally agree that the bylaw needs updating and that Gregor McGregor's an expert and he, all of his comments on the bylaw were good and we need to address them. But at this point, I don't like going in circles. So.
Thanks, Beth. And Scott, do you want to?
Sure, I'll make it short and sweet. I agree with what Beth just summarized. To me, you know, I did read through what Gregor McGregor had shared. It makes sense. I don't think I've heard anyone say that the bylaw doesn't need updating. I think the real quandary that we're faced with in executing our responsibilities as a commission are trying to interpret a bylaw without the regulations. And I think that that's been pointed out to us many times that we're that's not a great place for the commission to be, to try to be utilizing a bylaw without those regulations. I think just my brief experience on the commission, I think it would serve to clarify things for the commission and for the public. I think it would be useful. I think we, in the public meetings that we've had thus far on the draft regulations, I think what I've heard are a lot of support for moving forward with crafting regulations. And I think, you know, I guess what I'd like to hear from the select board is, to me, this doesn't seem like a mutually exclusive proposition, that it's either the bylaw or the regulations. I think it can be both. It seems that the regulations seem to me that we already have a bylaw, and we're implementing that every time we get together and entertain permits and requests of the commission. And this is something that we believe we need to do our job effectively, and that we've been advised by council that we need to do our job effectively. And I'd like to hear from the select board if there are concerns about moving forward with regulation, exactly what those would be. Granted, we don't have regulations, you know, we had some drafts before, so I think we're still moving through it. I think Marianne's proposal to wrap in the select board into the public process for reviewing the draft regulation seems to make a lot of sense to me, and would be a way for everyone to get on the same page, which is what we all want. So I don't know if the select board has thoughts on that, but I'd love to hear where the individual members might be in terms of, you know, are you all supportive of moving forward with drafting regulations for an existing bylaw, recognizing that while we all think a new bylaw would be beneficial, there's no guarantee that a new bylaw is going to pass, and we haven't drafted one yet. And so we don't want to be in a position, you know, for, you know, the foreseeable future, trying to implement an existing bylaw without regulations, without promise of some new bylaw that, you know, may or may not happen. So I'd love to hear from the select board on that. Thank you.
Robin, you haven't had a chance to talk. Do you want to make any comments? You're muted, Robin. Robin, you're muted.
Sorry, I don't have a lot to add after Beth and Scott. They pretty much, you know, summarized a lot of what I'm feeling.
How do you feel about the idea of having a public hearing that includes the select board? Does that make sense to you, or do you have a different suggestion?
No, I think that makes sense. And I like the idea that it's a public hearing because a lot of people are interested in this.
I do think the answer to Scott's question, I guess Beth's question is, what does the select board view? My view would be, again, that we have entertained the notion of bylaws versus regulations with preeminent environmental lawyer in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and he says, do the bylaws first. So, and that not doing so, my sense of what he's suggesting is not doing so opens us up to potential lawsuits. That is to say, if we have regulations based on the current bylaw, some of which is not, you know, good practice anymore, that those regulations are in fact not, they're not going to hold up in court. So his thing would be to start with that. So in terms of why does the select board feel that way, I guess I would sort of turn that question around and say, why doesn't the Conservation Commission feel that way? What's the objection to doing the bylaws first? I guess that's my question, sort of coming the other direction.
Somebody,
Do you want me to respond?
yeah.
Yes,
That's
somebody,
great.
sure.
So we all need to understand that we have a bylaw. It has the force of law. It was approved by the voters of Shutesbury many years ago, but it is approved by the voters of Shutesbury. We have taken an oath to uphold the bylaws and the charge of our commission. And that bylaw charges us to administer it. So we do not have the legal authority to say, I like this bylaw, but I don't like that bylaw. It would be tantamount to the planning board saying, gee, I don't like our zoning regulations. I'm just going to start issuing permits and let you put your house anywhere you want it. And I'm not going to have any setback requirements because I don't like our zoning bylaw. Even if we think there's some warts, it doesn't invalidate the law. It is still a law until a court rules that it is no longer a law or it is replaced by the voters of Shutesbury. I would hope that we would come together in embracing wetlands protections, whether it's under the existing bylaw or a future bylaw, that we would talk about our values and the things that we care about and come to some common understanding about what are we trying to protect, and then what is the best way for us to protect those things. And I think that's a really important conversation, and I don't think that's a quick conversation. I think there needs to be a lot of public education building up to a bylaw review and revision. In the meantime, we meet twice a month, we review dozens of projects, and we administer the bylaw because we have the jurisdiction and the authority to do it, but we also don't have the discretion not to do it. It's really our job and we have to do it. And we don't have the authority to put it aside. So with the understanding that it's valid, I just want to also point out that there are dozens of communities across Massachusetts with bylaws that are virtually identical to ours, maybe slight wording changes, but many of the towns that have bylaws passed them in the 80s and 90s, and they use the same model language that Shutesbury used in 1987 when it passed this bylaw. So when we talk about this bylaw being bad, we should just understand that there are many, many, many communities in Shutesbury in Massachusetts that are still upholding the same kind of bylaw and still administering it and have not seen fit to change it. So there may be some things that we can revise or update with a new bylaw. It may be that we can pass some regulations that cure some of these problems and make it unnecessary. I can't speak to that because we haven't had a legal review to really look at that. We have tried to address many of Mr. McGregor's concerns by revising these draft regulations to respond and to remove language or change language that he objected to. So we're hoping that the new draft that we're going to be putting up on our website in the next day or two will be much closer to what he would think would be appropriate for this existing bylaw. We had no intention and still have no intention to expand our jurisdiction illegally, to do any sneaky backdoor slipping in rules and restrictions that aren't legal. None of that is true. We want to be flexible and we want to make this bylaw and what we do with permitting appropriate for Shutesbury, meaning appropriate for our wetlands and our habitat, but also appropriate for our residents. And just as an aside, I just want to point out that in these draft regulations, we have proposing a number of exemptions, which would mean that all sorts of projects that currently have to be reviewed wouldn't be reviewed at all and would need any permit from us. And we're suggesting developing a small project permit that would allow a great many projects to be done very quickly and cheaply with very minimal permitting oversight. So we're trying to listen to residents and respond to what we think we hear from residents about what's important to them. And anyway, so enough said.
After point of clarification, because I've heard a couple of the members of the Concom say this, and I just, it makes me feel a little uncomfortable, actually, to be truthful. So the bylaw is written, you have hearings and you go to the town, voters vote at it in town meeting. So I think it was Scott that said that they're doing the regulations right now because there's no guarantee town meeting or the voters of Shrewsbury will vote for the new bylaw. So what I felt in those comments was the regulations don't have to go through that process. There's a public hearing, you take input, but there's no vote from the townspeople of Shutesbury on that piece, so it's guaranteed to be put in place, correct?
Let me,
It
can I,
The
Little-
bylaw gives the Conservation Commission jurisdiction to promulgate its own rules and regulations. And that is.
So what I heard in those comments was, we're not gonna do a redo of the bylaw because it's not guaranteed, we're gonna do the restrictions that are, or the
But-
I think
regulations.
Scott has his
Go
hand up.
ahead, Scott.
yeah, let me clarify, because I think you misunderstood what my
That
comments.
makes me, I'm gonna let you know that now. That makes me feel uncomfortable that townspeople of Shrewsbury don't have a chance to vote on the regulations in the same way that they vote on their bylaw. I understand that there's rules and there's laws against the are set up, but it does make me feel.
Well, I don't know if this will make you feel more comfortable or not, but let me just try to clarify what in fact I was trying to say. My understanding is that the town passed a bylaw some years ago, and we've been utilizing that bylaw as a force of law to issue permits, to do our very best here in the town as a Conservation Commission to protect, what the intent of that bylaw was, which was wetland protections in the town of Shutesbury. And my own observation as a commissioner is that there are parts of the bylaw that are a little confusing as to what it really intended. I mean, laws are more general, regulations get to be more specific. Miriam mentioned minor exempt activities, and that's something, if you have looked at some of the past conversations that we've had on the Conservation Commission, something that I've been very interested in pursuing. Ways to make things easier, to streamline permitting, to make it easier in town residents to comply with the existing bylaw that we have. And so what I'm saying is this. We very well may pass a new bylaw, and that would be great. And I think if we were to have regulations in the interim that were developed, I think it could be illustrative, maybe to help inform a future bylaw as well. Whether or not a new bylaw passes or not, your guess is as good as mine. We haven't drafted one. We haven't put it out for vote. I don't know if it would happen or not. If it passes, then we would promulgate additional regulations under that bylaw, presumably. If it doesn't pass, then we still have the existing bylaw that we have right now that we're trying to, to uphold and implement, and it's very difficult without regulation. So it's not a question of trying to subvert a town vote. And I don't know if that's what you were implying here or not, but what I'm saying is we should absolutely have a vote on a new bylaw. I think that would be great. In the meantime, we need to do regulations, and that does need to be an open public process. And that's, I think, what we're asking for here is to put those drafts out, to get input from the citizens of Shutesbury, to get input from the select board, and to move forward, in our due diligence to uphold the law that's already been passed and is currently in effect. Thank you. I hope that clarified what I was trying to say.
Thank you, Scott.
I wasn't insinuating anything. It was just what I was hearing in the comments that was making me.
Thank you, Melissa. I'd just like to add the 2 points. One is that we in no means are interested in subverting the vote of the people of Shutesbury. In fact, the people of Shutesbury have spoken and have a bylaw that they voted for, and we're trying to respect the authority of the town of Shutesbury and its wisdom in passing that bylaw. So we don't have, whether the town develops a new one or not is in some ways a political decision. It has to be voted on by the town meeting. We don't adopt a new bylaw. We can promote one and recommend one to the town. And we, in fact, have drafted a preliminary draft, which we have on our website, and we have shared it with the select board and with a number of town boards. And, at some stage in this process, I'd like to start having the conversation about, developing a working group to begin to review that.
Cutting out,
Sorry, what?
you're cutting out. You're
Okay.
cutting out just your. just
Sorry,
your- yeah.
little moment, a little a waiver in the force, tremor in the force. Anyway, so that draft is on our town website, and anybody who wants to look at the draft, and we are hoping that we can develop a working group process to start reviewing that. And as is true for all bylaws that I've seen in Massachusetts, regulations are passed by the regulatory board to institute rules and practices and procedures. And the voters vote for the bylaw, and we promulgate the regulations within the clear lanes defined by the bylaw. We're not extending any jurisdiction. We're not giving up or ceding any jurisdiction. We're just developing the procedural rules and the scientific standards so that we can properly administer the bylaw. And 95% of our regulation draft is science and scientific standards and procedures, which I would hope is not controversial. I assume everybody on this call cares about science and believes in environmental science, and well-crafted, well-respected, settled scientific procedures, I would imagine we would all agree are important and should be respected. And that's really
I want to
kind of
just,
what our wheelhouse is. Thank you.
I just want to add a couple of things, and then I'd like to wrap up this part of the discussion. So first of all, I can speak for myself, and I think I can speak for the other members of the select board. We have no issue with the Conservation Commission doing regulations. It's a good thing. As you said, Donna McNichol, our town council, has been recommending it. But she also, as McGregor has said, is do the bylaw first and then do your regulations, because you're basing regulations on an outdated bylaw. And I know the town voted for it, but the town voted for it 30 plus years ago. Was it 87? 37 years ago. A lot has changed in 37 years, including the population of the town of Shutesbury, and state law, state regulations, case law, and that was really the point. It's not do the regulations, but rather have a bylaw that matches the regulations. And again, I go back to my original point about the legal. This is really about the legal vulnerability for, we have been told you have a problem doing this. And if we get sued, or the Conservation Commission gets sued, we could be looking again at tens of thousands of dollars. And we're just saying, let's do it the proper way so we cannot have that happen. We already have a suit again with a bylaw that was thoroughly vetted and up to date. It could happen again. So that's our caution, and I think that's our responsibility as the chief elected officials of the community to say what we think protects the town of Shutesbury. So, given that, what I'd like to do is, Miriam has made a proposal to, so you're going to do, would this be another public hearing, Miriam, or?
No, I think that we would have a public hearing, and we would dedicate a period of time for an exchange with our councils and our consultants and the two boards. And then we would open up, perhaps if it's a 2-hour hearing, we would open up the second hour to public comments and questions. And at that point, decide or at some point whether we need yet another meeting or not. I think that that's to be decided. It's premature to decide on that.
Okay, Eric, Melissa?
I think I appreciate the proposal, Miriam. I can see even a half of a conversation about this going beyond an hour with the three of us, the Concom and the attorneys, and to limit it to an hour, I don't think gives the appropriate time or discussion that this deserves. And, you know, I mean, it'll be a posted meeting the public can attend. So it's not a closed meeting by any, that's correct, in that, right? It would be open meeting.
Oh, yeah.
So the public can be there to witness the conversation and discussion, but to limit it to an hour, I don't feel like that could happen realistically. We met last night on something that we thought might be fairly short, and it was a good 2-hour meeting. And we still had discussion and questions after, so and answers that we needed. So I think that the hour limit is not, I think, I don't agree with an hour limit. I think having a special meeting for it, you know, and then having it somewhat in person, so that, or hybrid with the public attending.
Well,
So that we sit around and talk with each other in a way that's not through a computer screen, and get our questions in that way.
so if the select board wants to be present in town hall to sponsor the hybrid portion of it, that's fine. But I feel very strongly about it being on Zoom, and I have personal health reasons that prevent me from sitting in a meeting in town hall, and I would need to be chairing this. That is kind of a limit that we've been having all of our meetings by Zoom, and I think that it's worked well. And if there are individuals that want to participate by showing up at town hall, we could set up somebody to sponsor or facilitate the presence at town hall. I think that this should be part of a public hearing, not a separate process. It needs to be part of our public hearing process. And I believe that there should be room for public comment in this process as well, not just the public observing, but the public having an opportunity to ask questions or make comments. So I think an hour is sufficient. And if we feel after an hour it's not, then we could have that conversation and discuss a next step. You know, I'm not saying no to another one, but I also am mindful that if we can resolve this quickly and efficiently, it's going to save the town money, and that's important. And it's going to save our commission money, because we're going to be spending resources, not just for our council to be there, but also for our paid third-party reviewer, which is also going to cost us money. So it'd be a very expensive meeting. And I think we need to be mindful that we want all of our consultants there so the public can hear what they have to say. And we can hear what they have to say. But there's a limit to how many meetings. And I think we need to try to be mindful about that. So that's my suggestion, is that we propose this public hearing and see how that goes. Commissioners, how do you feel? I mean, can I hear from the commissioners?
So why don't we finish with the select board? And then
Okay.
go to commissioners. I agree with Melissa. I don't think an hour is adequate, and I wouldn't expect as part of a public hearing for our attorney to be taking questions from the public. I think that's not an appropriate use of his time, nor do I think it's an appropriate use of special counsel for the conservation. You know, this is a decision that needs to be made by the select board and the conservation commission, and not involve the you know, I think comments, we've gotten lots of comments about the regulations and about moving ahead with the regulations, and also a lot of comments about taking the regulations a little bit slower and going through them and having a better explanation. But the question about the content of the regulations, yes, the experts are fine. I think the public would be inappropriate, and I don't see why it has to be done in a public hearing. It could be done in a public meeting, but not as part of a public hearing. I don't think an hour is adequate.
Well, I think it should be definitely, absolutely must be done in a public hearing, Rita, because this is all part of a public hearing process. The select board role here is as a board weighing in on this review process, but we are doing this through a public hearing process as we're required to. There is no kind of statutory role for working meetings outside of a public hearing. We would be creating something that isn't part of the process, and I'm not comfortable doing it. I feel like we've already begun a process and we're inviting the select board to be a part of it. We're also mindful of the expense, because it's not really clear how we would be paying for Beth Goodman for multiple hours or multiple meetings. I know that there's an offer on the table for a donation, but we have no idea how much that donation would be. I don't know. And it may not be sufficient. And the first priority for me, and I think for the commissioners, is to get an attorney to review our draft and let us know what needs to be revised, what is legitimate, what is good and needs to be kept in from a legal perspective, and from the perspective of avoiding appeals. It's not that anybody's going to sue the town over these regulations. It's that permit decisions might get appealed, but they might get appealed now.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not that somebody is going to sue the town for $300,000 in damages. That's not what this is about. It's about somebody appealing a decision, and because either they don't like the decision or because they think that the regulations were improper or improperly applied. But that could happen today. It could happen now because we don't have regulations to refer to. So, that's always a risk with any regulatory board, that decisions can get appealed and people have the right to file appeals. And that's just the way the law is. Everybody has the right to appeal these things up to a certain point. So
Can I make another proposal? Let's do a public hearing for 2 hours strictly on the regulations and have the attorneys there, and the public is invited, but we're not trying to accomplish anything else.
I think that what I would like to suggest is that, if you feel like you need more than 1 hour, we could say, okay, we're going to have up to 2 hours, but if there is room, or if the commission wants to extend the meeting in order to accommodate public comment, I absolutely want to make sure there's room for public comment. I feel like if we're making it a public hearing, there should be at least some opportunity for public comments.
I just wanted to reflect on the fact that when you had Gardner at your earlier meeting, you had him for 1 hour, and by the time he spoke, which was over half an hour into that hour, when he was done, I believe you had 7 minutes left for public comment. So I'm not sure how, is this going to be a case where if we schedule it, that there won't be hardly any questions allowed anyway? Because if
Becky, unfortunately, we had to reschedule our public hearing, and he was originally available for the first date, but he had a commitment at 8 o'clock. And so he had to leave, and we had a discussion that we had a PowerPoint we wanted to. I'm sorry, could I just finish? So we had a difficulty. He had to leave at 8 o'clock because of a prior commitment, and we were unable to have him stay longer. And so I believe we had about 40 minutes where he was available, and it was unfortunate that he couldn't stay for the whole public hearing. But I would hope that we would arrange for him to be available for the whole public hearing next time.
Okay, so where are we? There was proposal, oh, I see one hand, Elaine.
Hi, thank you for taking this. I really, really would strongly urge you to make this a public meeting where we at least have the opportunity in the school gym to have people together, because it's totally unfair to people who do not have access to Zoom. And it's very difficult to see who even is in the room when you have 52 people who are on a Zoom and you don't get that many people on a screen. Some people are on a phone. It's just not, it's not good public works to not have people present in a room together. And I understand people have some restrictions, some health restrictions, but those people can be on Zoom. But thank you.
It can work out that way. We
Yeah.
can do a hybrid that.
Well, we've been doing it this way and it's, I'm not inclined to change it at this point. So can we wrap this up? I think that, you know, we've had this, we've kind of come to as close to a meeting of minds as I think is possible. So I think what you're asking is that we have a public hearing at least 2 hours. And that there be an opportunity for discussion between the attorneys. What I would like to do is ensure that part of that meeting involves an opportunity for public comment. I am concerned about structuring it in a way where the attorneys filibuster for 2 hours and drag it out, and then there's no opportunity for public comment. I think that having some constraints means everybody has to be succinct and we have to work toward resolutions rather than re-talking and re-arguing points. I don't want us to go around in circles for 2 hours. I don't think that would be money well spent for the community, especially if it means that the public can't participate. So again, I think an hour is sufficient, particularly if, for example, the attorneys have an opportunity to look at the revised draft in advance. They could even provide written comments in advance, so we could be prepared to respond. And if we have to make revisions before the public hearing, that would be fine too. Perhaps Mr. McGregor would have feedback on our new version, and that might save us all some time. But I don't think this public hearing process should be about debating whether or not we should wait for a new bylaw. I feel like the bylaw and whether we develop a new bylaw is somewhat of a separate issue. And I don't think that a public hearing for regulations is really the right avenue for it. What we really want to hear about is what is in the regulations that is helpful to our work, what needs revisions, how can we better explain it to the public, et cetera, what's legally appropriate. That we want to focus on the regulations. This is a public hearing for the regulations. It's not on all things related to bylaws.
I don't think we're going to come to agreement this evening, obviously. So I think the select board will continue this discussion.
Well, the offer is
I like
still
it.
there, and we would still, you know, I think, you know, we're going to meet and set up a date for another public hearing. And it sounds like you have voted to give us access to counsel. So we would welcome having this discussion, and I think, you know, an hour is going to be sufficient, with the understanding that, you know, maybe it could be a little bit longer, but you know, to designate 2 hours worries me, because I'm just afraid that there won't be an opportunity for public comments.
Well, we've had this discussion probably for close to an hour, so an hour is a very short period of time. And I don't think it's adequate. And so we're not in agreement, and I still believe that, you know, there's more to be said about the bylaw, possibly. But I'm not sure where we go from here, but I'm ready to end this discussion tonight, and we'll get back to you.
Okay.
I like the idea of the attorneys presenting, or the new regulation and written in a way that the attorneys can look at them ahead of time, or however we,
Mhm.
that's a good idea to me. Just I throw it up.
So I am going to give you a scope for Beth Goodman's review. Is that right?
Detailed, like outline them, when I ask the question.
Yes, I'll give you a detailed scope. And what might we expect in terms of a turnaround for having that scope approved, so that we can plan accordingly.
Through it
Just vote on it.
quickly, right, the next meeting.
Yeah, we'll probably do it at our next, is our next meeting next week? Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get it.
I will get it to you before Tuesday, and that would be great.
Yeah.
What about the
Before
donation?
Tuesday.
And what about the
Not-
donation account?
The donation account?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the last item on the agenda. So you
Wait,
don't,
before you have that,
Yeah.
Karen, why don't you have it to us by Friday? Friday or 8 o'clock Monday morning, because some of us work and need to be able to read before we go into a meeting to vote on it. So have it,
I'm out of town, leaving 6 o'clock on Friday morning. And I'm not sure I can get it to you before Monday evening. I think I could get it to Monday evening.
doesn't Beth Goodman have to do it? Isn't it Beth?
Right, I have to write up a scope, and then I have to run it by her, and I'm just saying I have very limited time. I'll do my best, but I think it might be Monday evening.
Okay, so the establishment of the legal fund, you mentioned earlier, you don't know how much that is, Miriam?
No, I
We can't really establish a fund, but I just want to make sure it's clear. So the proposal, and I think I wrote this directly from Mr. Seletsky's email, is that the donation account come under the sole control and discretionary use of the Conservation Commission and be earmarked for legal counsel expenses related to the town's wetlands bylaw regulations and any revisions to the bylaw itself. So this is another instance where it would be where legally you can set up a separate account, just as we did for the solar bylaw, the legal account, and it could be set up, but I'm not sure we can fulfill his requirements, because the select board would have to approve all expenditures from that account, just as we do with legal counsel, with special counsel. So it wouldn't be solely at the discretion of the Conservation Commission. It would have to be, and that's under state law, chapter 44, section 53A.
and that's what we had to do with the planning board.
Yeah. Yeah, but that, yeah, this is the planning board account is money that we can access. It's not to the planning board.
Oh, yeah.
This,
Sorry.
this is distinct from that. That's to, it's to help pay legal counsel.
Yeah.
This is different. So I'm not sure that, that, I guess you'd need to go back to him and see if that was acceptable. Because the way it was written, it doesn't.
is he
Wait,
here? Is he here on the call? On the meeting?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Well, is there a way to structure it so that, I think that, and I'd have to check with him, and I don't know, that the concern is that he wants the money only used for these purposes. He doesn't want the money used for any other purpose. So I suppose, the select board has the authority to say they're not going to pay for something, but they wouldn't have the authority to say it could be used for some other purpose. It either is used for this purpose or for no purpose at all. But that it couldn't be repurposed for something else is what I'm imagining would be
Yeah, so that's correct, but I think the way that he wrote it, it needs to be, we need clarification, that he understands.
Could you provide some suggested language that would be consistent with the state law? So, we don't go back and forth trying to wordsmith this. I think, if you have a sense of how it should read, if you could send it to me in an email, then I can reach out to him.
Okay, that sounds. Okay,
Thank you. Mary had her hand raised.
I think she put it.
Yeah,
down.
I was just trying to clarify, his intent, but my assumption was if we asked the select board to use council, that this would be a fund to pay for it, so we wouldn't be looking at charging the town accounts.
No, that's understood. It's more the way he worded it, and it was very clear and very specific. So I want to make sure he understands what our responsibilities are. Because we couldn't abide, I think, by the way he worded it. So I just want to make sure that's
Yeah, I understand.
okay. Okay, I think we are done.
We.
Select board has a couple of items.
Things, but.
Yep, you're welcome to stay. Are you adjourning the,
Are there any items involving the Conservation Commission or the culvert project that we should stay for?
no,
I can't hear. Sorry.
no,
Oh.
no.
All right, well, I will make a motion to adjourn the Conservation Commission meeting at 8:51 PM. Do we have a second?
Second,
David,
aye.
Font, I, Harrington. That's an I from Harrington.
I.
Khan,
Aye.
Wilson.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night, thank you. Okay, so I'm sorry, we have these two things that came up that I need support from the select board for. The first item is the Gale Associate proposal that was written to the building committee for continued work at the elementary school for evaluation services. And that would be phase and task number 1 for the evaluation services of $9,800 plus up to $4,000 for reimbursables if there is cause to do searching of materials for asbestos or chemical issues of that nature, which sometimes are required, but sometimes not. So so the basic fee is the $9,800 for the evaluation services, and it's a fixed fee.
And where is this money coming from?
The building committee requested an additional $20,000 for their building renovations fund. They had 20. Some of that 6,000, just under 6,000 is already committed to the windows that we hope to install in the town clerk and copier room at town hall. And then this item would come from that same fund.
Oh, okay, so it's money they already,
Yes,
that's
and
already
that's
been,
why
we're not approving
typically,
any money.
no, and that's why
Okay.
typically this would just be signed off by the town administrator because it was already approved by town meeting.
Right.
But because they specifically in their proposal required the officers, I'm coming to you to do it as they requested it.
All right.
Okay,
Yeah, do I hear a motion to approve? So is it 9,400 plus 4,000?
it's 9,800
9,800,
plus
so
4,000.
$13,800.
Yes,
for Gale Associates to do
Evaluation
evaluation.
services on the exterior of the elementary school.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Carol, aye.
Thank you very much. And the second thing, I believe you all have been receiving copies of the grant application for the Dudleyville Dam. It is required that the application be submitted through combis by a municipality, while the dam owner is allowed to put in the application. It's a DER application, Department of Energy Resources, for services to further explore the removal of the Dudleyville Dam. This has been an ongoing concern for over 20 years. And if we can give support to the Browns on this project, I think it's critical that we do so. It will require cooperation between the town and the Browns, which they, Lois has said they will provide and work with the town and communicate and in an ongoing fashion. So I hope the select board will support this.
And this
grant.
is unanticipated. We just heard from her last week.
He just came, yes,
Yeah. And the applications due
Friday.
So there's no town financial obligation.
No
then?
obligations at all. It's just because they have set it up on combis, there's no way for an individual to apply. Only municipality, I mean, for the municipalities are the ones that have the accounts. So it needs to be done by the municipality. It's not, they can't just submit the application in paper, or they would have already done so.
Okay, questions? All right, do I hear a motion to approve Lois Brown's application? The town will submit it on her
Combi.
behalf, on combis,
Yes.
on her behalf. So,
Second,
all right, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Carol, aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Carol, aye. All right, good night.
Thank you,
Good night,
everybody.
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 Thank you.